This is Holly, the girl who bankrupted her last business partner. My mother said into the bright May air outside the graduation hall, and 18 people within 10 feet of us heard every word. By the end of that week, I had lost a signed job offer worth $42,000 a year, been dropped from a housewarming event I was supposed to style, and watched a lie my parents invented harden into something other people repeated back to me like fact. The worst part was that they did not stop at humiliating me in public. They emailed that same accusation to my new employer, my landlord, and the couple hosting the housewarming, and they did it with enough fake detail to make me look dangerous to work with. Then a woman I had never met walked into a living room in Overland Park, opened a manila folder, and read one sentence out loud, and my mother's voice disappeared in the middle of my name. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Holly Elaine Mercer. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Wichita, Kansas on Saturday, May 18th, 2024. I graduated from Wichita State with an associate degree transfer track through Butler and WSU after 3 ugly stop and start years. I had worked mornings at Juniper and Ash, a candle and home goods studio on East Douglas, then taken classes in the afternoon, then closed the shop twice a week because I needed every hour. I'm not saying that for sympathy. I'm saying it because my parents knew exactly how hard I had dragged myself back into a life that looked normal. My mother, Denise Mercer, loves public rooms, not noisy rooms, admiring rooms. She is 53, speaks in a measured voice, and has the kind of posture that makes strangers assume she is the reasonable person in any disagreement. My father, Alan Mercer, is quieter and somehow worse because he lets her strike first and then steps in as if he is there to calm things down when really he is just making the lie look balanced. They had owned a boutique called Mercer Lane Mercantile in Andover for 18 months, from January of 2022 through July of 2023. It sold gift boxes, dried florals, imported soap, and overpriced kitchen linens with handwritten tags. I worked there for 7 months after high school, and again for a stretch after my financial aid got delayed. So did my friend Maren Bishop, who became their business partner in the way older adults say when they want a younger person to do the labor, cover the weekends, and put their name on the website while all real decisions stay in the family. When the boutique collapsed, my parents told people it was because Maren was disorganized and I had mismanaged vendor relations. Those are the words my mother used the first time. Soft words, polite words, not criminal words, not ruinous words. At first, I thought they were just trying to save face in front of church people and neighbors in Andover who had spent too much money on monogrammed tea towels. I moved out in August of 2023, rented a one-bedroom on North Oliver in Wichita, and cut contact down to birthdays and unavoidable holidays. Then I got the offer from Juniper and Ash. On Wednesday, May 8th, at 10:14 in the morning, Celia Tran, the owner, emailed me a formal offer for studio coordinator. $42,000 a year, health insurance after 60 days, and a start date of Monday, June 3rd. She attached a PDF. I signed it at my kitchen table while my coffee went cold, with the window open and the smell of cut grass coming in from the apartment courtyard below. I cried for exactly 40 seconds. I counted because I was trying not to spiral. This was not a glamorous job. It was inventory, wholesale orders, workshop scheduling, shipping labels, vendor calls. I loved all of it. I made the mistake of telling my father. He called me on Thursday night, May 9th at 8:22. I was parked outside Dylan's on Central because I had just picked up generic allergy medicine and cat litter. He said, "Your mother and I are pleased that you are finally stabilizing." That is how he talks, like every sentence should be stitched onto a pillow. I said, "Thanks." Then he said, "You should not tell people too much too early. It creates embarrassment if plans change." I remember looking at the glowing pharmacy sign and thinking, that was not concern, that was a warning. I still went to graduation. Of course I did. I had already paid for the cap and gown, already invited my aunt, already arranged brunch at Homegrown for 6 people. I kept my parents on the list because I'm an only child, and there is a specific kind of hope you can carry long after it has stopped being reasonable. Not the hopeful kind, the habitual kind. The ceremony was at Charles Koch Arena, but the photo crush after was on the west steps and walkway, where families always spill out and block each other with bouquets and balloons. It smelled like sunscreen, parking lot heat, and those white lilies people buy wrapped in grocery store cellophane. My aunt, Sandra Pike, had brought peonies. My father had his navy blazer on. My mother was in a cream blouse and had practiced looking tears ready for every photo. A girl from one of my sociology classes asked if she could take a picture of me with my parents because her mother wanted a turn with her phone. We all stepped together. My mother put one hand at my back and leaned in. Then she said, clear as glass, "This is Holly, the girl who bankrupted her last business partner." Not whispered, not muttered into my hair, said outward with a smile, so the people near us would hear and register it as a joke she had the right to make. There were 18 people close enough to catch it. I know because later I went back through the graduation photos and video clips posted to Facebook and counted the visible faces in that cluster by the west railing. Two women stopped talking. One older man actually turned his head. My classmate lowered her phone halfway down. My father gave a tight little laugh and said, "Denise?" But he was smiling too. I felt my body go cold before I felt angry. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change and your mind gets very quiet before it catches up, you know exactly what I mean. I did not defend myself there. I did not start crying. I looked at my mother and said, "You should not have said that in public." Then I stepped out of the picture. That sentence bought me the next piece of evidence. Because my classmate, Talia Romero, had still been recording, not intentionally, she had switched from photo to short video by mistake. On Sunday evening, she texted me a 21-second clip. You could hear my mother's exact words, then my father's laugh, then me saying, "You should not have said that in public." At the end, somebody asked, "What happened?" and the video cut. I saved it in 3 places: my phone, my Google Drive, and a folder on my laptop called May. I had been keeping that folder for 11 months. Brunch after was dead on arrival. My Aunt Sandra kept trying to move us onto safe subjects. The pancakes were too sweet, the bacon smelled burned. My mother acted as if nothing had happened and asked whether I had thanked everyone for coming. My father asked if I had parked in the garage or on the street. I paid for my own plate and left before the check came. At 2:26 that afternoon, my mother sent me a text. "You overreacted? No one thinks less of you. People appreciate honesty." I took a screenshot. At 4:03, she sent another. "If you had handled Mercer Lane responsibly, no one would have material to reference." Screenshot. At 7:12, my father texted, "Your mother's remarks were clumsy but not false." Screenshot. That phrase sat in me like a stone. Not false, not we were upset, not we were embarrassed, not we should not have joked. He had put it in writing. By Monday morning, 3 people had messaged me some version of, "I am sorry about what your mom said." One of them was Talia. One was my aunt. The third was a woman named Gina, whom I barely knew from church when I was younger. She wrote, "I did not think it was appropriate, especially on your day." On Tuesday at 9:46 in the morning, Celia called me from Juniper and Ash. I was folding towels at my current part-time shift and could hear the shop's diffuser running lavender and bergamot in the background. Celia sounded careful, not warm, not cold. "Careful," she said. "Holly, I need to ask you something difficult." I already knew. She said that someone identifying herself as my mother had emailed the shop from a Gmail address and warned them that I had a documented history of causing financial losses in small retail partnerships, and that I had previously bankrupted a business associate through negligence and dishonesty. She said there were enough specifics in the message to make her nervous. Vendor names, the old store name, a mention of unpaid sales tax, a line about missing inventory reconciliations. My mother had not just humiliated me, she had built a package. I said, "Would you forward me the email?" Celia paused, then said, "I can send a screenshot." At 9:59, she did. Subject line, confidential about Holly Mercer. Sent Sunday night at 11:18. My mother's name signed at the bottom. 5 paragraphs of poison dressed up as concern. One sentence said, "As a mother, I feel morally obligated to prevent another young woman from being bankrupted by Holly's carelessness." Young woman, she meant Maren. I did not argue with Celia. I did not beg. I said, "I understand why you are concerned. Please give me 24 hours. I can show you records." She said, "All right." At 11:31 that same morning, my landlord, Peter Wallace, emailed me asking for a call regarding a concerning rumor received by another tenant. Somebody in the building had seen my graduation clip on Facebook, recognized me, and forwarded it to him with a note asking whether I ran business operations out of the apartment. That one did not cost me my lease, but it told me how fast this was moving. On Wednesday evening at 6:10, Leah and Brandon Keene texted me that they were changing direction on the styling help for their housewarming in Overland Park on June 15th. I had been scheduled to set tables, handle floral placement, and help Leah with rentals because she knew I did event setup on weekends. She had already approved my invoice for $980. I called her. She let it ring twice and picked up. She said, "Holly, your parents told Brandon and me there was a lot we did not know." I stood in my kitchen in socks on cheap vinyl flooring, looking at the magnet list on my fridge and said, "What exactly did they tell you?" She hesitated, then said, "That you bankrupted your last business partner and that there was missing money around the old store, and they felt we should not have you handling vendor deliveries in our home. There are insults and then there are labels. Labels travel farther," I said. "Can you send me whatever they sent you?" She did not answer that. She just said she was sorry and that they were going in another direction. I hung up. Silence. Then I opened my laptop. This is the part people like to skip over when they tell stories like this, because gathering proof is not cinematic. It is fluorescent light and old passwords and naming files correctly. It is reading things twice because your hands are shaking. It is making columns. It is choosing not to scream because screenshots work better when the text is clean. Now let me take you back to July of 2023, the week Mercer Lane Mercantile closed. The store had been failing for months. Not because of me, not because of Maren, because my parents were spending vendor deposit money before orders arrived, because my father kept moving money out of the operating account to cover their personal truck payment and a timeshare installment, because my mother insisted on carrying expensive imported inventory that sat on shelves while local items sold out and never got reordered, because sales tax notices came in certified envelopes that stayed unopened on the back counter beside the wrapping paper. Maren knew some of it, I knew more. The store bookkeeper, Evelyn Barta, knew all of it. Evelyn was 61, wore square reading glasses on a beaded chain, and came in every other Thursday with a legal pad and a canvas tote that smelled faintly of peppermint gum and toner. She was not family, she was not a friend. She was the kind of woman who noticed if the petty cash was off by $6.28. She also knew when to be silent, which is a quality that can be useful until it becomes cowardice. On July 11th, 2023, I watched my father transfer $4,200 from the store account to his personal account on the desktop in the back office because he thought I was too distracted unpacking candles to look. He said it was a reimbursement. There was no reimbursement entry. On July 15th, a sales tax notice from the Kansas Department of Revenue arrived showing 3 quarters unpaid. My mother tucked it under a stack of tissue paper and said, "This is an accounting lag." On July 21st, Maren cried in the alley behind the shop because a ceramic vendor had called her directly asking why the deposit bounced. The store closed on July 28th. My parents posted on Facebook that the closure was due to staffing instability and partnership misalignment. That phrase still makes me laugh because it is so nakedly ridiculous. But back then it worked. People accepted it because adults with mortgages and church clothes are often believed over women in their 20s with side parts and hourly jobs. After the graduation disaster, I pulled every record I still had. QuickBooks exports from when my father asked me to clean up categories one weekend and forgot I had access. PDFs of vendor invoices, screenshots of group texts with Maren where we begged for restock approvals, photos I took of unopened certified mail on the stockroom table, my own Venmo history showing I had personally covered $216.40 for emergency shipping tape and tissue paper in June because the store debit card declined. My mother had later called that an example of Holly taking chaotic control. I created 5 folders: graduation, job, housewarming, Mercer Lane tax. Then I called Maren. We had not talked in 8 months because the store collapse had blown through our friendship too, not the dramatic kind, the exhausted kind. She answered on the third ring on Thursday, May 23rd at 7:19 in the evening. I was sitting in my car in the Dillon's parking lot again because apparently all my bad calls happen near groceries. I said, I need to ask you something, and if the answer is no, I will leave you alone. She said, Your mother did that at your graduation, did she not? I closed my eyes. You heard. 3 people sent me the clip. Of course they did. I told her about the job offer, the housewarming, the emails. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, I kept more than you think. That line changed everything. If you have ever been in the position where the truth exists, but it is sitting in other people's inboxes and closets and conscience, you know how strange that hope feels. Not relief. Not yet. The kind that makes you sit very still because moving too fast might break it. And if this story is landing with you so far, please like and subscribe now, because the next phone call was the one that told me my parents had planned this better than I realized. Maren met me Friday morning at Reverie Coffee Roasters on North Hillside. She came in wearing a black linen shirt and carrying a red accordion file. The place smelled like espresso grounds and toasted sourdough. Somebody was steaming milk too hard. I remember that because the hiss kept cutting across what she was saying. She had bank statements from the old business account because my father had once made her an authorized user during a wholesale market trip when he wanted her to pick up inventory in Dallas. She had forgotten she still had online access until after the store closed. She had downloaded statements for January through July of 2023 before the account was locked down. She also had emails from 2 vendors asking for overdue deposits and one from Evelyn, the bookkeeper, warning my mother in writing that sales tax was 3/4 behind. Maren slid the statements over to me one by one. On April 4th, $2,100 transferred to Alan Mercer. Memo line blank. On May 19th, $1,486.17 to Denise Mercer Consulting. That business did not exist on June 26th, $3,000 to Sunflower Ridge Resorts, the timeshare. I said, Why did you keep this? She looked at me for a long second and said, Because I knew someday your mother would call me a liar with a straight face. We sat there for 90 minutes, we built a timeline. We matched transfers to bounced vendor deposits and tax notices. We highlighted every sentence in writing where my mother blamed either of us for a problem the records tied back to her or my father. Then Maren told me something else. 2 days after my graduation, Denise had emailed her too. The subject line was enough damage. The body said, You will not contact Holly. You have already cost her enough by allowing her to believe your version of Mercer Lane. If you continue involving yourself in her life, I will have to share the full accounting of what happened with people who still trust you. My mother had tried to isolate the witness. That same afternoon, I texted my Aunt Sandra and asked if she had kept notes from the brunch because she writes everything down in those tiny blue notebooks she carries in her purse. She called me instead. Sandra is my mother's older sister and had spent my entire life doing the family version of peacekeeping, which mostly meant cleaning up emotional blood after Denise left a room. She said, Holly, I should have spoken right there. I said, but you did not. A pause, then, no, I did not. There is always one person who knew and stayed silent, because silence let them keep their place. I loved my aunt, but that was who she was in that moment. She offered me 2 useful things. First, she had heard my mother on the phone the week before graduation saying, if Holly gets this studio job, she will start telling a cleaned-up version of Mercer Lane. Second, she had the exact date Denise had bragged to her about warning people before they get hurt. Sunday night, May 19th. The same night the email to Celia went out. On Saturday morning, I printed everything at Office Depot on North Rock Road. 2 full sets, one for me, one for whoever needed to see it. 73 pages. The printer toner smell stuck to my hands the rest of the day. I also called a friend of a friend named Priya Natarajan, who was not my lawyer because I did not have lawyer money, but she did work in employment compliance at a hospital and knew how to think in timelines and paper trails. We met Sunday at 2 in the afternoon at a Panera in East Wichita. She wore a tan coat despite the heat because office people always seem to have a coat somewhere. I spread everything across the table between iced teas and soup cups. Priya looked through the stack quietly, then said, Do not send emotional summaries, send dated packets. Make each person decide whether they want to believe your mother after seeing source documents. Plain, useful, exactly right. So that is what I did. On Monday, May 27th, At 8:10 in the morning, I emailed Celia a 3-page timeline with attachments, the graduation clip transcript, the email screenshot from my mother, the bank statement pages showing personal transfers, the tax notice email from Evelyn, the vendor messages, a 1-paragraph note from Maren stating, I was presented publicly and privately as the partner responsible for Mercer Lane's financial collapse. The attached records show the opposite. At 8:43, I sent a shorter packet to Peter Wallace, my landlord, because I did not need him as an ally. I just needed him to know I was not running scams out of apartment 14. At 9:02, I sent Leah Keene a version that included only what involved my work reputation: the housewarming, the vendor warning, the false, missing money line, and the graduation clip. Then I waited. Celia called at 1:17. I was sitting on my bed with my laptop open, not reading anything. She said, I'm sorry, I should have asked you first. Then she reinstated the job offer. Same pay, same start date. She also forwarded me the full original email from my mother, not just a screenshot because she wanted me to have the headers and timestamps. Sunday, May 19th at 11:18 and 44 seconds p.m. That second mattered later. Peter emailed at 3:31 and said he considered the issue closed. Leah did not answer at all, but my parents were not done. On Wednesday, May 29th at 6:56 in the evening, I got a message request on Facebook from a woman named Jolene Keene, Brandon's mother. She lived in Lenexa and was co-hosting the June 15th housewarming because apparently new homeowners now need maternal event boards and signature cocktails. Her message said, I understand there are financial concerns around your participation in this event. We need to protect our family. I stared at it for a full minute. My mother had gone around the couple and reached the mother. I called Leah again. This time she answered, sounding frightened and embarrassed. She said Denise had called Brandon's mother directly and said I had left a trail of debts and damaged women behind me. That exact phrase, damaged women. My mother says monstrous things in the voice of someone discussing centerpieces. I asked Leah how many people had heard the accusation at graduation when Denise said it. She said enough that Brandon asked me in the car whether we should worry. There it was. Concrete consequence, social transmission, witnesses becoming repeaters. Then Leah told me the part that made my stomach drop. Denise and Alan had been invited to the housewarming too. I said, did you tell them I was doing the tables? Yes. That meant my mother had not just decided to ruin me at graduation. She had picked a second room in advance. A room where people cared about community reputation, hiring recommendations, and who could be trusted in their homes. I said very calmly, Leah, I'm asking you for one thing. Do not discuss this with them again until after June 15th. She asked why. I said, because I want them to keep talking. She was quiet for a second and then said, Holly, what are you doing? Documenting. That night, I made a new folder, Keen Housewarming. I had the original invoice, I had the text where she hired me, I had the cancellation, I had Jolene's message, I had the timeline showing my mother's Sunday night email campaign right after graduation. Now I needed one more piece. I needed an outsider. Not someone who loved me, not someone who had picked a side, someone boring, someone objective, someone with records and no interest in family politics. That person turned out to be Evelyn. Now, let me take you back to Thursday, May 30th at 11:12 in the morning, to a strip mall parking lot off West Maple where the heat was already rising off the asphalt. I had texted Evelyn the night before. Just one line. Do you have copies of the tax warnings and transfer concerns from Mercer Lane? She answered at 6:07 a.m. We should not discuss by phone. Meet me at the corner pantry. 11. Corner Pantry was one of those small sandwich places with laminated menus and a humming soda cooler. It smelled like dill pickles, floor cleaner, and fryer oil. Evelyn was already there in a booth, canvas tote beside her foot. She did not greet me first. She said, your mother told people you bankrupted Maren. At my graduation, I know, Denise called me Monday to ask what I would say if anyone asked about Mercer Lane. That was my answer, meaning she had said enough to tell on herself. Evelyn took out 6 documents. 3 Kansas Department of Revenue notices addressed to Mercer Lane Mercantile, stamped and dated. 1 email she sent Denise on July 17, 2023, saying, please stop transferring operating funds to personal accounts while sales tax remains unpaid. 1 handwritten reconciliation page showing the exact amount missing from vendor deposit coverage as of July 20th, and one invoice from her own bookkeeping service for $720 that my parents still had not paid. I said, "Why are you giving me this now?" She looked almost annoyed by the question, because Denise told Jolene Keene at Bible study that Maren was practically homeless because of you, and that was nonsense. I do not enjoy being made adjacent to nonsense. That is still one of my favorite sentences anyone has ever said to me. I asked if she would be willing to speak if needed. She said, "I will say what is in my records, nothing more." Perfect. If you have ever had to build your own credibility from scratch while the people who harmed you keep walking into rooms ahead of you, then you know how much one neutral adult can matter. One woman with invoices and dates can do what a year of pleading cannot. Keep listening, because 2 weeks later my parents got exactly the public room they wanted, just not the ending. The days before the housewarming were very still. That was the worst part. My mother did not text me. My father sent one message on Sunday, June 2nd at 9:11 p.m. It would be wise not to create more disruption. I saved that too. On Tuesday, June 4th, I started at Juniper and Ash. The shop smelled like cedar dust, soy wax, and grapefruit cleaner. Celia had me organizing the back room by vessel size. There is something very healing about doing a small task exactly right while your life is on fire elsewhere. She apologized once more and asked if I wanted her to block my parents if they contacted the business again. I said yes. She said she already had. By Friday, June 7th, I had what Priya called a clean chain: graduation clip, texts, email headers, job offer withdrawal and reinstatement, housewarming cancellation, Jolene's message, bank transfers, tax notices, Evelyn's records, Maren's statement, my aunt's willingness at least now to confirm the phone call she overheard. It was enough. The question was where it needed to land. Leah called me Sunday night, June 9th, while I was labeling tester jars at the studio. She said Jolene wanted to clear the air before the party and had invited my parents over that Wednesday. Then she lowered her voice and said, "Brandon told her no more private calls. He wants everyone in the same room if this gets discussed again." I actually smiled for the first time in days. I said, "Would Jolene be willing to hear from the Mercer Lane bookkeeper?" Silence. Then, "There was a bookkeeper?" "Yes. Can she come?" "Maybe." That meeting fell apart because Denise refused to attend if outsiders were being brought in to perform theatrics. Again, her words. So the next room remained June 15th. The Keene's new house was in Overland Park, near 87th and Quivira, one of those subdivisions where every driveway has a black SUV and every porch has a wreath that changes by season. The housewarming started at 6 on a Saturday. 32 guests confirmed. I know because Leah sent me the final planning note by mistake before I had been removed from the styling chain, and I still had it. I was not invited by the hosts. I was invited by Jolene 3 days before at 11:21 a.m. on Wednesday, June 12th. She wrote, "It may be best for everyone if you are present to address concerns directly." That sentence told me she still half believed my mother. It was enough I said yes. I wore a navy dress and flat sandals because I wanted to look like someone who belonged in a room with documents. I put the packet in a cream portfolio from Target. 79 pages now, because I had added the job reinstatement email and the Facebook messages. Maren met me in the driveway at 5:53. Evelyn arrived separately at 6:08 in a silver Honda CR-V with a dent over the back wheel. She carried a manila folder and looked like someone dropping off tax prep. My parents were in the kitchen when I walked in. My mother had on a coral blazer too formal for a summer housewarming. My father was holding a sweating glass of iced tea. The house smelled like grilled chicken skewers, lemon cleaner, and fresh paint. Somebody had lit a candle that was trying very hard to smell expensive and mostly smelled like clove. Denise saw me and said, "I did not realize this was that kind of gathering." I said, "Apparently it is." Leah looked terrified. Brandon looked angry in the controlled way of men who are trying not to embarrass themselves in front of their mothers. Jolene looked righteous, which is not the same as correct but often dresses the same. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. People ate. Ice clinked. A realtor named Susan complimented the backsplash. My mother moved through the room like she had already won. Twice I heard her say, "Some family situations are unfortunate but instructive." Then at 6:34, Brandon tapped a spoon against his glass and thanked everyone for coming. He said a few words about buying their first home and the importance of community. He was almost done when Jolene stepped in beside him and said, "And because there has been some confusion involving one of our service providers, I think it is healthiest if we put a rumor to bed." I almost laughed. A rumor, as if my mother had not manufactured and distributed it herself. Jolene turned toward me and my parents. "Denise, perhaps you should simply say what you meant the other day so there is no misunderstanding." My mother did not hesitate. This is important. She did not act flustered or trapped. She saw a microphone and took it. She set down her glass, folded her hands lightly, and said, "I meant exactly what I said. Holly bankrupted her last business partner, Maren Bishop. There were unpaid taxes, missing inventory, and damaged vendor relationships. Brandon and Leah deserved to know before allowing her into their home and around their event accounts." The room went still. 32 people. I counted later from Leah's seating list and the video clips posted afterward. My father added, "It is painful to say publicly, but truth sometimes is." That was their second public accusation. Specific, detailed, designed to stain. I said, "Thank you." Just that. Then I looked at Leah and said, "Would now be a good time?" She nodded once. I did not open my portfolio. I did not start reading. I had learned by then that people hear self-defense as self-interest. Instead, I stepped aside and let Evelyn Barta move in from the edge of the dining room. Most people there did not know who she was, which made her perfect. Evelyn adjusted her glasses and said, "My name is Evelyn Barta. I handled bookkeeping for Mercer Lane Mercantile from February of 2022 through July of 2023. You could hear the refrigerator ice maker dump a tray in the kitchen." She opened her folder and read in the same flat voice she probably used to tell people they forgot receipts. "I emailed Denise Mercer on July 17, 2023, and told her to stop transferring operating funds to personal accounts while sales tax remained unpaid. I have copies of 3 state tax notices and bank records showing those transfers. Holly Mercer did not bankrupt Maren Bishop. Denise Mercer and Alan Mercer drained business funds while blaming 2 younger women for the shortfall." Silence. Then Maren stepped up beside her and said, "I was the partner she is talking about. I was not bankrupted by Holly. I was lied about by Denise and Alan. There is a difference." Brandon took the folder from Evelyn. He read the first page, then the second. Jolene leaned toward him. He did not hand it to her. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She said, "That is not the full context," Evelyn said. "It is the full transfer record." That was it. That was the sound of the floor giving way under her. My father started to say, "Holly, you should not have," and stopped on the word have. Leah asked Brandon, "Is that why they called my mother?" Maren answered before anyone else could. "Because if Holly started working publicly again, people would stop believing their version." A man from the patio, somebody's brother in a Royals cap, said, "Wait, they emailed employers?" Celia's forwarded email was in the packet. Brandon got to it 4 pages later. I watched his face change as he read the line about morally obligated and another young woman being bankrupted. Then he read the timestamp. Sunday night after graduation. Jolene finally took the packet. She read for maybe 15 seconds, then looked directly at my mother and said, "You told me there had been an investigation." My mother said very softly, "There was review." Evelyn replied, "No, there was bookkeeping." That line broke the room. Not with chaos, with recognition, with the sudden, deeply embarrassing clarity that some people had let a polished woman narrate a younger one into ruin because it felt socially efficient. If you have ever waited for the exact second a lie stops sounding elegant and starts sounding stupid, you know how satisfying that is. Not dramatic, structural. The room changes shape around the truth. And if you're still with me here, subscribe, because what my parents lost that night was not just the argument. Brandon asked Denise and Alan to leave. Not later. Not after cake. Right then, he said, "You used our home to spread something you knew was false. You need to go." Jolene, who had invited them, did not defend them. She only said, "Denise, get your purse." My mother gave me one look I can still see clearly. Not rage, not shame. Calculation failing in real time. She said, "You arranged this." I said, "I documented it." My father put his glass down on the quartz island so carefully you would think he was in a museum. Then he said, "This was unnecessary." Brandon answered him, "No, Your email was. They left through the front door at 6:49 p.m. Coral blazer, navy slacks. My father's left shoelace untied. That detail is useless except that I remember it. The room did not turn into applause because real life almost never does. People stood in clusters. Somebody whispered, "My God." Leah cried quietly in the laundry room because she felt guilty and humiliated. I went in there, handed her a tissue, and said, "You were manipulated. That is not the same as malicious." She nodded and said, "I canceled your invoice." I said, "I know." She wrote me a new check for $1,400 that night, $980 for the canceled styling, plus $420 for what she called the cost of dragging you into this. I did not ask for the extra money. I took it. Then, Jolene did something I did not expect. She asked for copies of all of it. On Monday morning, June 17th at 9:04, she emailed the Women's Bible Study group where my mother had repeated the accusation and said, "I passed along false information about Holly Mercer that originated with Denise Mercer. Attached are records showing that information was untrue. Please disregard anything previously shared by me on this matter." She attached Evelyn's statement and Maren's 7 women responded all. That was how fast my mother's social credibility started bleeding out. But the concrete price was bigger than gossip. Remember the unpaid bookkeeping invoice Evelyn had in her folder? $720. Remember the 3 tax notices? Those had not disappeared. All my parents had really done was count on no one connecting them to the transfers publicly. After the housewarming, Evelyn stopped covering for them. She mailed her records to a collections service for her unpaid invoice and separately answered a call from the Kansas Department of Revenue agent whose name was on one of the old notices. Her name was Sherry Klein. I know because Evelyn told me in a voicemail on June 26th at 8:13 in the morning. Ms. Klein requested confirmation of certain historical account movements, and I provided copies. That was all she said. That was enough. 2 months later, on Friday, August 23rd, my father called me at 3:42 in the afternoon. I was in the juniper and ash stockroom with a box cutter in one hand and a shipping manifest in the other. I let it go to voicemail. He left one message 28 seconds long. "Holly, your mother and I need a copy of whatever Evelyn gave people. We are dealing with a state payment issue that does not concern you, and there is no reason to keep widening this state payment issue." 3 days later, my Aunt Sandra sent me a text from the Sedgwick County Public Records portal showing a state tax lien against Mercer Lane Mercantile and Allen Mercer, filed for $14,862.19 in unpaid sales tax, interest, and penalties. Denise's name was listed on the business registration attached to the notice. Sandra wrote, "I thought you should know. That was the concrete price. Not abstract shame. Not people found out. $14,862.19. A lien payment plan required." Their accountant dropped them the next month, according to Sandra, because he does not remain with clients who conceal transfer histories. There was another one. Jolene chaired the decor committee for a large holiday fundraiser in Johnson County every November. It was exactly the kind of event my mother loved because it offered a microphone, a seating chart, and women who reward poise. Denise had expected to co-chair that year. Instead, on September 10th, Jolene emailed her that due to recent conduct involving knowingly false statements made about a vendor and community member, Denise would not be serving in any committee role. My aunt forwarded me that too. My mother lost the room she valued most. My father lost something smaller but more intimate. Brandon managed a regional home improvement supplier where my father had been angling for a part-time purchasing role after an early retirement package. That conversation ended the night of the housewarming. Brandon later told Leah, who told me there is no world where I bring him into vendor management after that email. No role, no fundraiser seat, tax lien, bookkeeping collections, a written apology chain in the exact circles where my mother had planted the story. As for me, I kept my job. 3 months later, Celia raised me to $44,000 because I streamlined workshop scheduling and negotiated better rates with 2 wax suppliers. Leah referred me to a baby shower client in October. Maren and I are not what we were before Mercer Lane, but we speak now, which is its own kind of repair. Not the innocent kind, the adult kind. My parents tried twice to contact me after August. On October 2nd, my mother emailed, It is regrettable that outsiders were allowed to misunderstand a family matter. I did not answer. On Thanksgiving morning, my father texted, "There is still a place for you if you can be calm." That one almost made me laugh. Calm was never the issue. I had been calm the whole time. Calm is how I beat them. I spent Thanksgiving with my Aunt Sandra, who made green beans too soft and kept apologizing for things she could not go back and change. At one point, she said, "I keep hearing your mother say it on those steps." "So do I said. That is the part people do not like at the end of stories like this. They want the reveal to erase the wound. It does not. It just stops the bleeding. I still hear my mother saying, "This is Holly, the girl who bankrupted her last business partner," in that bright, crowded space with graduation balloons knocking against strangers' shoulders. I still remember the smell of sunscreen and lilies, and the way my classmate's phone dipped when the room went quiet. Winning does not make the sentence unsaid. It just puts its owner where she belongs. I have not reconciled with them. I do not know if I ever will. There is no brave little final speech where I explain boundaries and they finally understand. They understand perfectly. That was never the problem. The last thing I heard about Denise came in January of this year. Jolene told my aunt that Denise had shown up to a committee lunch at First Light Cafe anyway, just to clear the air, and no one invited her to sit down. She ordered soup, ate alone, and left in 19 minutes. That is not enough to heal a daughter, but it is a start.